It is 2025, and you would think people's knowledge on the world has increased until you hear people you assume should know better ask certain basic questions. Ladies and gentlemen, do you know the most asked question about Africa in 2025? And the questions asked the most about certain African countries? For instance, did you know that the most asked question to any black person from Africa in any part of the world directly in the face is, are you a Nigerian? Be honest with me. This is without any exaggeration the most asked question, even in Africa and in the world, to any black African person. Are you a Nigerian? I've heard that a lot, and if you can relate, tell it in the comment section. The questions I have here are shocking, and this episode is to bring to your attention what most of the people around the world ask when they want to know about this continent and perhaps your country. So stay with me as I bring you to speed. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Cyrus, and this is Tuntum Network in Accra, Ghana. Be sure to subscribe and click on the bell for more of my videos. Let's dive in.
Africa Funder is a website which enables you to raise funds from people in the diaspora in order to assist with the completion of projects that would help to foster the growth and development of the continent. Raise funds for a range of diverse projects, whether it be for schools, classroom remodeling, healthcare services, or the next unicorn technology company. Sign up now and allow us to begin this journey together.
According to Google, the number one most asked question about Africa is this: is Africa a country? Interesting. And I would ask you this, ladies and gentlemen: has Africa ever been a country, and will it ever be? Now, you would think that this is a question posed by people from some isolated part of the world, but that's not the case at all. This is the most asked question by people from America, from the United States of America. They ask this question the most. I'm tempted to believe, ladies and gentlemen, that they have some of the dumbest people in the world. And then Canada, Germany, Spain, Norway, and so on. They all ask these kinds of questions, and frequently, the people that ask this particular question are mostly people from Western countries and then from some Asian countries. People actually think that Africa is a country, ladies and gentlemen, in 2025. And that makes me wonder, are we the only continent that actually does geography in schools in 2025? But it doesn't even end there, ladies and gentlemen. I'm also going to share with you what internet users ask the most about many African countries. Let's begin with Egypt. According to Google, the most asked question about Egypt is Egypt safe? Most people are fascinated about Egypt. The pyramids, for instance, and their history is quite intriguing, and people want to visit. And in fact, Egypt receives the most tourists in all of Africa. But interested travelers' first question is Egypt safe? Which actually makes sense, not just to Egypt, but to any country you intend to travel to. But I want to ask you, the viewer, this question. Is Egypt safe to visit for a black African? In fact, is any of the northern African countries safe to visit for a black African in particular? Now, for the rest of the African countries, two questions happen to be the most asked questions, whether simultaneously or interchangeably. And these are they: do I need a visa, and is that African country safe? Here I group these two questions into one because it's the most obvious question to ask about any country you want to visit, ladies and gentlemen. Now, the second group of questions all have to do with animals. This is where my problem is. Ladies and gentlemen, check out these questions they usually ask about Africa on the internet. About South Africa, they ask, are there lions in South Africa? Are there giraffes in Kenya? Are there elephants in Nigeria? Are there anacondas in the Congo? Can I see a lion in Ghana? Is there tigers in Uganda? And so on. It's one animal after another animal. And occasionally, when the person is a business person, they ask of gold and diamonds. Ladies and gentlemen, Apart from hunger and wars, these are some of the basic questions people like to ask about African countries on the internet. And I remember one time in China, let me share that story quickly, when an older lady rubbed her hands on my skin and asked this, your country is pretty close to the sun, right? And just when I wanted to respond, another person asked this, do you only drink Coca-Cola in your country? Then I asked, why Coke? And she responded, because your complexion looks like Coca-Cola. Ladies and gentlemen, there are so many strange notions about Africa out there. Another example is a stereotype in the Chinese language about Africa. The Chinese refer to Europe as Ojo and America as Meiguo, and every one of these Western countries or developed countries with a name that has some beauty to it or some form of intelligent connotation attached. But when it comes to Africa, they call the continent Feizhou. Meanwhile, every Chinese word that starts with a fei or fei is either a bad word or a cuss word or a word with a negative connotation. Ladies and gentlemen, the world's perception of Africa since our nations were born has been negative and distasteful even till date. My question, however, is this. Why has the Western countries been successful at projecting their good aspects of their countries, even though they have other bad aspects and we haven't? Listen to this. Do you know that the West has CNN and BBC? You know it. And the Middle East has Al Jazeera. And now WEON is gaining popularity coming from India and projecting their countries and continent. But the whole of Africa has not a single respectable continental television, ladies and gentlemen, or platform that projects our stories and narratives. We have such a big gap when it comes to projecting and shaping narratives on this continent. From music to movies to news, we don't. It's all the same. It has taken the effort of social media content creators to step in and showcase what we have as a continent. We need that type of dominant television or platform in Africa which will do all that I've mentioned and wouldn't be owned by a foreigner. Ladies and gentlemen, things must be deliberately and strategically done to achieve what we want. And by the way, where are all the animals in Africa people constantly ask about on the internet? Where are all the giraffes and the rhinos and lions and co? Many of us from Africa have never even seen these animals, which makes it confusing. The question is, have we not eaten the majority of them, ladies and gentlemen? Especially in Ghana. It's a normal thing to walk to any small local food vendor and find the meat of an antelope or many of these game in the soup. We have practically eaten most of them. And there is this other question also asked about Africa, which I would love to hear your opinion on. Let me ask you. When internet users ask about diseases in Africa, how does it make you feel, ladies and gentlemen? Because in the eyes of many Asians especially, Africa is a diseased continent. And because of this stereotype, there are real situations in Africa where diseases that factually started in other countries are tagged to Africa as originating from here. How does that make you feel as an African? When you ask foreigners to name 3 things that comes to mind the moment Africa is mentioned, all 3 most likely will be negative. As a matter of fact, if I ask you, an African, to do same, ladies and gentlemen, you may end up saying something similar. Who has caused this and how do we correct it, ladies and gentlemen? It's all about a set agenda and the narrative to push the agenda. You can be the best baker in the whole world, but if you choose not to advertise what you have, the worst baker will control the bakery industry. This is why even though Coca-Cola sells so much products in the world, they still do the most ads just to remind you to buy a bottle for today. The narratives won't make themselves until we do it, ladies and gentlemen. So let's get up and speak up, or else someone will speak for us. By the way, thanks for taking time to watch this episode. Be sure to subscribe and click on the notification bell to see all of my videos. I'll come your way again with another one very soon. Until then, God help Africa. It is bye-bye from now.